Hi everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into an incredible story of love, redemption, and second chances that you won't want to miss. Lucas Marshall, an arrogant and wealthy man, took on a wager that he never imagined would alter his life so profoundly. He thrived on competition, always securing victory in business and personal pursuits. At a grand New York party, his friend Jack presented an unexpected challenge that piqued Lucas's interest. Jack smirked and said, "Lucas, I bet you wouldn't dare marry someone who's not your usual type." Lucas, who was known for dating conventionally attractive women, hesitated only briefly before raising an eyebrow. "And what's the reward?" he asked. Jack raised his champagne glass with a mischievous grin. $1 million to the winner. But you have to marry her, and stay married, for at least 6 months. Tempted by the financial incentive and the chance to prove himself, Lucas immediately agreed. The woman Jack had in mind was Chloe Richards, someone who didn't meet society's typical beauty standards. Lucas knew nothing about her, but considered it just another deal to close. Days later, he learned more about Chloe. She was strong, confident, and independent, and traits far from what Lucas was used to. Intrigued, he began to wonder how he would handle someone who couldn't be easily controlled. They first met at an upscale restaurant. When Chloe arrived, Lucas immediately noticed her self-assured demeanor. She wasn't intimidated by the lavish surroundings or by him. She held his gaze firmly and said, "You must be Lucas Marshall." "And you must be Chloe Richards," Lucas replied, extending his hand with a polished smile. Chloe hesitated before firmly shaking it, conveying her strength and determination. "Let's not waste time," she said directly. "I know about the bet, the terms, and the conditions." Lucas was taken aback by her straightforwardness, but kept his composure. "Yet, you still agreed to meet," he said, curious about her reasoning. "I have my reasons," Chloe replied coolly. "I'm not naive, Lucas. 6 months might sound short, but a lot can happen in that time. If you think you can control or manipulate me, you're mistaken." Lucas found her defiance captivating. She was more of a challenge than he'd expected, and that made the situation even more intriguing. Their first meeting left Lucas wondering how to approach the next steps. Chloe's unshakable confidence and lack of intimidation impressed him. When they met again, it was at a small, modest cafe, a far cry from Lucas's usual glamorous venues. Chloe had chosen the place, and Lucas agreed, curious to understand her better. Chloe was already seated, sipping tea and smiling calmly as he arrived. "You don't usually go for places like this, do you?" Chloe teased as he took a seat. "Sometimes it's good to break the routine," Lucas replied, though he felt a bit out of place. As they chatted, Chloe quickly turned the conversation to serious matters. "If we're really doing this," she began, setting her cup down, "I have a few conditions. I'm not after your money or your lavish lifestyle. I'll walk away from this the same way I came in." Lucas studied her closely. Chloe's sincerity was clear. This wasn't about social climbing or material gain. "So what do you want, Chloe?" he asked, genuinely intrigued. "Freedom," she said, without hesitation. "Even though we'll be married on paper, I won't let you control me. My life is my own, and I won't give that up for a temporary arrangement." Lucas nodded, smiling slightly. This wasn't the answer he expected, but it was a condition he was willing to accept. To him, marriage was just a formality to win the bet. If Chloe wanted to maintain her independence, Lucas didn't mind. "Fine," he said. "After 6 months, we'll go our separate ways." Chloe watched him carefully, making sure he really agreed. She had a plan and was determined to see it through. Deep down, she suspected Lucas would try to manipulate the situation, but she trusted her own strength to stand her ground. They parted ways with an understanding. Chloe would keep her freedom, and Lucas would treat the marriage as a mere formality. Yet, as the wedding day approached, Lucas started to realize this wasn't going to be as simple as he had thought. The wedding itself was cold and businesslike, more like a contract signing than a celebration. Lucas, confident in his strategies, was certain he'd win the bet. He thought 6 months would pass quickly, and that Chloe would eventually succumb to the lavish life he could provide. After the ceremony, he brought her to his massive New York penthouse, a towering symbol of his wealth and power. Its glass walls displayed the city skyline, and its interior boasted luxury at every corner. For Lucas, this was where he would prove his dominance. But the moment Chloe stepped in, she made it clear she wasn't impressed. 6 months, Lucas, she said firmly, staring out at the city lights. Not a day more. Her tone was steady, her demeanor distant. Lucas smiled, confident this was just the usual resistance he faced at first. Every woman he'd dated before eventually gave in. Chloe, he assumed, would be no different. In the early days of their arrangement, Lucas spared no expense in trying to win Chloe over. He gave her expensive jewelry, designer clothes, and luxury trips. But Chloe refused them all. She stuck to her simple lifestyle and calmly pushed back each time. "I don't need these things, Lucas," she'd say, her quiet defiance only fueling his irritation. Lucas was accustomed to always getting his way, but Chloe's refusal challenged him in a way he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't about the bet anymore. It was about his pride. He had to prove he was still in control. Lucas began to play harder. He stopped her from going to work, claiming, "You don't need a paycheck anymore." He delayed meetings she considered important, altered schedules, and tried to make her life revolve around him. But Chloe remained resolute. Each time Lucas attempted to exert his influence, she countered with a calm but firm resistance. The relationship turned into a battlefield of wills, with small, sharp exchanges punctuating their conversations. One tense evening, Lucas took a different approach. "I don't get it, Chloe," he said, frustration lacing his voice. "Any other woman would love this lifestyle, but you act like it's meaningless. What do you really want?" Chloe, who had remained composed, finally looked up with a fiery intensity. "What do I want? I want respect, Lucas. I'm not a pawn in your game. You think you can control me with money, but you're wrong. Money can't buy dignity or integrity. You surround yourself with wealth, but inside you're empty, and that's what you can't stand." Her words struck Lucas deeply. For the first time, he felt as though he wasn't just losing control, he was being exposed. Chloe wasn't just resisting. She was dismantling the facade he had built around himself. The realization shook him, but instead of relenting, Lucas doubled down. He sought to isolate Chloe, closing off her opportunities and sabotaging her efforts. He believed that making her life harder would force her to rely on him, but Chloe wouldn't break. Every setback only strengthened her resolve. She refused to let Lucas define her, and stood firm. Then, one night, she made a calculated move of her own. "You think you're in charge of all this, Lucas?" she said with measured precision. "But what you don't realize is that I have a plan too. And when the time comes, you'll see that this game you think you're playing isn't yours to control." Lucas stared at her, startled. For the first time, he realized he might have underestimated Chloe. He felt a flicker of fear that, in the end, he might not win. The weeks unfolded like a taut wire, tension growing daily. Determined to maintain control, Lucas tried every trick to tilt the situation in his favor, but Chloe held her ground. She was a fortress he couldn't breach. Every attempt to sway her only seemed to strengthen her resolve. Yet Lucas found it increasingly difficult to ignore what was happening. It wasn't just her resilience that commanded his respect. It was something more profound. Chloe was doing something no other woman had done. She was piercing his emotional armor, leaving him unsettled and confused. For the first time, Lucas began to see her as more than a participant in a bet. He wanted to understand her. One evening, after a heated exchange, Lucas stood alone in the penthouse living room, staring out at the city. The glowing skyline that once gave him a sense of power now seemed hollow. He asked himself why he felt so uneasy. Chloe was only supposed to be a 6-month commitment. She was meant to be just another piece in his game, nothing more. But the reality was different. She stirred something inside him. He, who always controlled his emotions, was now affected by her in ways he couldn't explain. Chloe had a way of seeing past his facade, and that left him vulnerable. As Lucas wrestled with these thoughts, Chloe went about her routine. She appeared more distant, as if waiting for something. It felt like an invisible wall had formed between them, and Lucas couldn't break through. This unseen barrier gnawed at him. He wasn't sure if it was pride or fear, but something about Chloe captivated him in a way he hadn't thought possible. "You're different," Lucas confided to Jack over dinner. "Normally by now, I'd have everything under control, but this woman is challenging me in ways no one else ever has." Jack smirked knowingly, but Lucas didn't have the words to fully explain what he was feeling. He hated admitting Jack was right, but he couldn't deny that Chloe was changing something inside him. That evening, Lucas returned home resolved to confront these feelings. He needed to regain control, to remind himself that this was just a contractual arrangement. But when he entered the penthouse, he found Chloe calmly reading a book on the couch, seemingly unaware of his presence. "Can we talk?" Lucas asked, breaking the heavy silence that had become routine. Chloe looked up, closed her book, and met his gaze with a calm but attentive expression. "Sure," she said, as if she had been waiting for him to speak. Lucas sat across from her, choosing his words carefully. The air was thick with tension. "What are we doing here, Chloe?" he asked, surprising himself with his own honesty. "This started as a game, a bet. But now I don't know what to think." Chloe considered his words before answering. "I'm not playing, Lucas. I never was." Her voice was measured, but full of meaning. "I agreed to this marriage for reasons that go beyond you. I don't care about your money or your control. I'm here for something bigger. And if you haven't figured that out by now, maybe it's time you started seeing the truth." Lucas felt a knot in his chest. It was as if she were revealing something he couldn't fully grasp. "I know you have your secrets, Chloe," he said, frustration building. "What bothers me is that the more I try to figure you out, the more I realize I'm not in control. And I hate that. Unable to sit still, he got up and began pacing, the weight of her words pressing on him. Chloe stayed calm, watching him move. Finally, she stood and stepped closer, stopping just inches away. Lucas felt his pulse quicken. "This isn't about control," Chloe said softly. "You've spent your life trying to dominate everything and everyone. But with me, you need to understand that control isn't always the answer. Sometimes you have to let things be." Lucas met her gaze, and for the first time, he felt he was truly seeing her, not as part of a strategy, but as a person. "So, what do you want?" he asked. Lucas froze, stunned by her words. For the first time, he realized he might have underestimated Chloe. She had orchestrated everything, and now he was beginning to understand the depth of her plan. The weeks that followed felt like walking on a razor's edge, each day, bringing new tension. Lucas tried every strategy he knew to regain control of the situation, but Chloe stood firm. Her determination seemed unshakable, and his attempts to sway her only seemed to make her stronger. And yet, something was shifting within Lucas. He began to see Chloe in a different light. Her resilience was undeniable, but more than that, she was unraveling his carefully constructed world. She wasn't just resisting him. She was revealing parts of himself he'd never confronted. Lucas found himself not only respecting her strength, but wanting to understand her. He had never felt so emotionally exposed, and it left him disoriented. The power dynamic he had always maintained was slipping away, leaving him confused and vulnerable. One evening, after a particularly tense argument, Lucas stood alone in the penthouse living room, looking out at the sprawling city. The lights of New York, once a source of pride, now felt distant and hollow. He couldn't understand why Chloe was affecting him so deeply. She had entered his life through a bet, nothing more. But now she was stirring emotions he didn't know he could feel. For the first time, Lucas was forced to face the emptiness in his life, an emptiness Chloe had exposed. Meanwhile, Chloe maintained her steady routine, as though she were waiting for the right moment to reveal her truth. Lucas could sense the barrier between them, a wall he couldn't break through. Her distance, rather than alienating him, only pulled him in further. He found himself wanting to know what motivated her, what she truly wanted. It was a mystery that consumed him, driving him to understand the woman who had turned his world upside down. During a conversation with Jack, the friend who had proposed the bet, Lucas admitted his frustration. "She's different," he said, his tone serious. "I can't figure her out." Jack raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Normally, you'd have this under control by now. Seems like she's got you thinking, for once." Lucas forced a smile, unwilling to show how deeply Chloe had gotten under his skin. But he knew Jack was right. Something about Chloe was unlike anything he'd encountered before. That evening, Lucas returned home, determined to confront Chloe. He wanted answers. The silence between them had become unbearable, and he needed to know where they stood. Entering the penthouse, he found her on the couch, reading a book. The casual scene was at odds with the turmoil in his mind. "We need to talk," he said, breaking the silence. Chloe looked up, closed her book, and gave him a calm, steady gaze. "All right," she replied, as if she had been waiting for him to speak. Lucas sat across from her, his thoughts racing. "What's going on here, Chloe?" he asked, his voice filled with a mix of frustration and vulnerability. "This started as a game, a bet, but it's become something else. I don't even know what to think anymore." Chloe's expression remained composed. "This was never a game to me," she said evenly. "I agreed to this marriage for reasons you couldn't understand at the time. It was never about the money or the bet. I had my own reasons that go far beyond you." Lucas felt a knot tighten in his chest. He tried to respond, but Chloe cut him off. "You've always been about control, Lucas. But not everything can be controlled. Sometimes you just have to accept that things are beyond your reach." Her words stung more than he wanted to admit. For the first time, Lucas felt truly powerless, and the realization terrified him. All his life, he had been the one in charge, but Chloe had flipped the script. "What are you trying to prove?" he asked, his voice low and uncertain. Chloe stood, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that left him speechless. "You've always seen people as pieces on a chessboard," she said quietly. "But this time, Lucas, you're the one who's been played." Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Lucas alone with the realization that he was no longer the one calling the shots. Lucas's voice cracked as he said her name, barely above a whisper. "Chloe," he began, but before he could finish, she stepped closer, cutting him off. "You didn't know? You didn't care," she snapped. "You destroyed lives, Lucas. Not just my father's, but mine too. I'm not here to ruin you. I'm here to make sure you never forget." Her words struck him like a blow. For the first time, Lucas felt the weight of his past decisions and the devastation they had caused. It wasn't about the bet anymore. It wasn't about control. It was about the wreckage he had left behind, and Chloe was holding a mirror up to his soul. She didn't give him time to respond. Without another word, she turned and left, her heels clicking softly against the floor, leaving Lucas standing in stunned silence. His legs gave out, and he fell back onto the couch, his head in his hands. Every word Chloe had said repeated in his mind, shattering the carefully constructed image of himself he had relied on for so long. He felt exposed, powerless, and utterly defeated. For the next few days, Chloe's indifference was unbearable. She moved about the penthouse as if Lucas didn't exist. She didn't acknowledge him at meals, didn't look at him when they crossed paths. When he tried to talk to her, his voice would hang in the air, unanswered. He had always been at the center of attention, the one calling the shots, but now he was a shadow in his own home, invisible in her eyes. The silence weighed on him, louder than any words could have been. Chloe's indifference extended beyond the confines of their home. At work, Lucas began to notice small disruptions. Meetings were rescheduled without his knowledge, and his decisions were called into question. Projects that had seemed solid started to falter, and he couldn't shake the feeling that Chloe was behind it all. Even though she never openly admitted it, her influence was undeniable. It was as if she was slowly dismantling everything he had built, piece by piece. At home, her disdain for him was palpable. She wouldn't sit with him at meals. She wouldn't respond to his attempts to reconcile. Every time he tried to talk to her, she met him with cold silence or a dismissive look. One evening, Lucas found her in the living room, a book in her hands. The room was calm, the soft light from the lamp casting a warm glow, but Lucas knew better. It was a calm before the storm. He sat down, gathering his courage. "Chloe," he said again, his voice low, I know I've hurt you. I know what I've done can't be undone. But please, let's talk. Can't we try to work this out? Chloe closed her book, slowly, deliberately. But she didn't look at him. The silence hung heavy between them as Lucas waited, hoping for some sign that she might be willing to meet him halfway. When Chloe finally raised her gaze, her cold expression sent a chill through Lucas. Talk, she repeated with a bitter laugh. You think there's anything left to say? Words won't fix this, Lucas. They're meaningless now. Lucas, desperate for a connection, stood and moved closer. I was wrong, Chloe, he insisted. I can change. I'll do whatever it takes. Her eyes locked on his, piercing and unforgiving. Change? She replied, rising slowly. Do you think that will undo what you've done? Will it bring my father back? Will it erase the years of misery we endured because of you? No, Lucas, it won't. She stepped closer, and Lucas felt the weight of her words crush him. Whatever you do now isn't for me. It's for you. This guilt, this burden, you'll carry it for the rest of your life. Lucas remained silent, struck by the realization that there would be no easy redemption. He wanted to fight to fix what he had broken, but he now saw that Chloe was beyond repair, beyond any simple resolution. In the following days, Chloe intensified her punishments. Every attempt Lucas made to show he was changing was met with cold indifference or biting sarcasm. One evening, after a catastrophic meeting at work, where a key project had been sabotaged, he returned home to find Chloe on the phone, laughing. As he listened to snippets of her conversation, it became clear she was orchestrating his failures from behind the scenes. She was dismantling his world in such a calculated way that only he could see it. When Chloe hung up, Lucas was waiting in the living room. His face was a mixture of exhaustion, suppressed anger, and hurt. You're destroying everything, he said, his voice low and strained. At work here, you're tearing my life apart. Chloe met his gaze with an icy calm. Destroying your life? She replied, her tone heavy with sarcasm. I'm just returning what you gave. Don't worry, Lucas. I'm not going to ruin you financially. That would be too easy. I want you to live with this pain, to feel every single loss, just like I did. I want you to watch everything you built crumble and know it's entirely your fault. Lucas felt the ground vanish beneath him. He was no longer the confident, powerful man in control of others' destinies. He was now a pawn in Chloe's calculated revenge. She wasn't interested in a quick defeat. She wanted him to endure every small failure, every look of contempt, until all that remained was his regret. As weeks passed, Chloe's disdain for Lucas only deepened. Once arrogant and full of pride, Lucas now wandered through the house like a shadow of his former self, desperate to earn a forgiveness that was never offered. No matter how hard he tried to redeem himself, Chloe's response was always the same: cold silence or bitter dismissal. One night, Chloe confronted him with a chilling finality. She approached as he sat on the couch, drained and defeated, and delivered the words that would haunt him forever. Lucas, she said, her voice calm but razor-sharp, you took something from me that I can never get back. Now I'm returning the favor, and you'll live with that for the rest of your life. Lucas didn't argue. He didn't try to defend himself. He knew there was nothing left to say. Chloe's punishment had been set into motion, and Lucas accepted that he would never be the same. Lucas began noticing the small details of Chloe's daily life. He paid attention to her routines, her preferences, and the things that made her smile. Without following her or invading her space, he quietly observed and remembered the little things she loved. She had a soft spot for flowers, especially peonies. Her coffee was always brewed strong, without any sugar. What had once seemed insignificant now became the foundation of his efforts to reconnect with her. That afternoon, Lucas went to one of the city's finest flower shops and picked out a bouquet of peonies. Instead of handing them to Chloe directly, knowing she would likely refuse, he left them on the kitchen table without a note. He knew that forcing a gesture would only push her further away. As Chloe returned from her walk, Lucas stood by quietly, watching her reaction out of the corner of his eye. She paused when she saw the bouquet, her expression unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, she picked up one of the blooms and inhaled its scent. Though she said nothing, that single movement was enough to give Lucas hope. It wasn't a rejection, and for him, that was a small step forward. Over the next several days, Lucas continued these subtle acts of kindness. He prepared the breakfast table, making her coffee exactly the way she liked it, then left before she arrived. He placed little things she enjoyed within easy reach, never forcing a conversation or confrontation. Bit by bit, he was trying to prove through his actions, rather than words, that he had changed. He was showing Chloe that he was paying attention, that he cared. But Chloe still kept her distance, her barriers firmly in place. Lucas understood this wouldn't happen overnight. He knew he had to earn her trust and respect on her terms, and that it would take time. One particularly cold evening, Chloe was on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, gazing out over the city lights. Lucas hesitated before approaching her, holding a cup of tea. He knew she enjoyed something warm before bed. "Here," he said softly, offering her the tea. "I thought you might like this." Chloe didn't respond immediately, but she accepted the cup, keeping her gaze fixed on the skyline. Lucas stood beside her in silence, trying to be there without intruding. The tension between them still lingered, but for the first time, it felt less oppressive, as if a shift was beginning. After a long pause, Chloe finally spoke. "Why are you doing this, Lucas?" Her voice was quiet, yet steady. Lucas knew he had to choose his words carefully. "Because I realized words don't mean anything anymore," he admitted. He stared out at the same horizon she was watching. "What I did can't be fixed with apologies. But I'm trying to show you that I'm different. I want to be better, not just for you, but because I know I need to be." Chloe remained silent, her fingers wrapped around the warm tea. The wind stirred around them, but the tension seemed to ease just a little. "You can't change the past, Lucas," she said softly. "I know," he replied, his voice sincere, "but I can change the future." For the first time that evening, Chloe turned her gaze toward him. Her expression was still guarded, but there was a faint flicker of something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Lucas recognized that she wasn't ready to forgive him yet, but he also felt that he might have reached a turning point. For the first time, it seemed possible that Chloe could start to see him differently. In the days that followed, Lucas continued his small, thoughtful gestures. He didn't push her or demand more than she was willing to give. Chloe still kept her distance, but she no longer rejected him outright. She accepted the flowers, the tea, and even tolerated brief conversations over breakfast. The walls between them didn't come down all at once, but cracks were beginning to show. The true test came one evening when Lucas was preparing for a business meeting. Dressed and ready to leave, he was startled when Chloe entered the room with an unreadable expression. "Can you cancel your meeting?" she asked, catching him off guard. She had never taken an interest in his schedule or asked anything of him before. Lucas hesitated only briefly before pulling out his phone and cancelling the meeting without question. It was the first time Chloe had shown any willingness to spend time with him, and Lucas wasn't about to let that chance slip away. They sat on the couch with a small gap between them, but for once, the silence wasn't uncomfortable. Chloe seemed lost in thought, as though reflecting on all that had happened in recent months. "I'm not ready to fully forgive you," Chloe finally said, breaking the stillness. "But you're showing me something different. I can see that you're trying, and maybe that's the start of something." Lucas felt his heart quicken. He knew he couldn't rush this. Chloe's words, though hesitant, were enough to keep his hope alive. He understood the journey ahead would be a long one, but he was willing to take every step necessary to earn her forgiveness and, perhaps, her love. The evening continued calmly as they chatted about light, everyday topics. For Lucas, it was a small victory, a sign of progress. He was slowly piecing together a fragile connection. Chloe was no longer a distant figure. She was beginning to let her guard down, and Lucas was determined never to underestimate her again. Even so, something remained unspoken between them. Lucas knew Chloe hadn't revealed everything. There was still a shadow hanging over their fragile peace, a secret that she was holding back, though he didn't know what it was. Lucas understood he would need to be ready when the time came. But for now, the fact that she was willing to sit and talk was enough. In the weeks that followed that quiet evening, Lucas felt a cautious optimism. For the first time in a long while, he sensed he was making progress. Chloe was no longer cold and distant, though she hadn't fully opened up either. Her guarded nature lingered, leaving Lucas constantly on edge. He recognized that this was a test of his sincerity, and he was willing to face it. Yet, he had no way of knowing that something far more significant was about to come to light. Lucas threw himself fully into proving he was a changed man. He rescheduled work obligations to ensure he was home more often, showing Chloe he valued their time together. He avoided pressuring her for answers, and instead focused on small gestures, making breakfast, sharing light-hearted conversations in the evening. These simple routines became a part of their daily life. The ice between them gradually began to melt, and Chloe's treatment of him softened. But despite these improvements, a nagging doubt lingered. Lucas could sense Chloe still carried a secret. Her occasional moments of reserve, her tendency to sidestep certain topics, suggested she was waiting for the right time to speak. Lucas could only wonder what truth she hadn't yet shared. Then, on a quiet, rainy evening, Lucas noticed Chloe seemed more withdrawn than usual. She sat on the couch, gazing out at the city lights with an introspective air. The tension in the room grew with each passing moment. Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of revealing something important. Finally, he spoke, breaking the heavy silence. "Chloe," he began, his voice almost trembling, "I know there's something you haven't told me. I can feel it. Please, if you're holding something back, I need to know." Chloe, seated with her hands folded in her lap, took a deep, steadying breath. She didn't meet Lucas's gaze at first. The pause that followed was agonizing, but Lucas knew better than to press her. He waited, patient and still, knowing that any forcefulness could undo the fragile trust he was trying to rebuild. After a long moment, Chloe lifted her eyes, a mixture of pain and resolve shining in them. "You're right," she said, her voice soft but laden with emotion. "There's something I haven't told you. I didn't think I could before, but maybe it's time." Lucas's pulse quickened. He leaned forward slightly, sensing that whatever she was about to say would change everything. Yet at the same time, he dreaded what he might hear. "Do you remember the company you destroyed? The one my father managed?" Chloe's tone was firm, but her expression betrayed her pain. "I told you that you ruined our family, and that's true, but there's more. It's not just my family that you destroyed." Lucas' confusion deepened. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice thick with concern. Chloe glanced down, as if summoning the courage to continue. Her fingers trembled slightly as she spoke. "I was pregnant," she said quietly. Lucas froze. The weight of her words crashed down on him, leaving him unable to breathe. "What?" he whispered, his voice faint. "I was pregnant," Chloe repeated, her eyes still fixed on the floor. "At the time when everything happened, when my father was gone, when we lost everything, the stress, the grief, the pressure, I lost the baby." For a moment, Lucas could only stare at her. The room seemed to tilt, and he felt as if the ground had vanished beneath him. The revelation hit him harder than he could have ever imagined. Chloe's voice, calm yet heavy with sadness, echoed in his mind. He tried to speak, to respond, but no words came. The enormity of what she had said left him utterly shaken. The guilt Lucas had been wrestling with for weeks now grew into something nearly unbearable. He had destroyed not only a company and a family, but also a life. "Chloe," he tried to speak, but his voice was strained. I didn't know. I never imagined." She turned to face him, her tears finally breaking free, streaming down her cheeks. Despite her pain, an undeniable strength radiated from her. "No, you didn't know," she said, her voice heavy with both hurt and resentment. "Because you never cared enough to know. You destroyed lives, Lucas, and you didn't even look at the people you trampled. I lost my baby, and you went on as if nothing had happened." Her words cut deep, each one a sharp reminder of the devastation he had caused. Lucas wanted to say something, anything, to repair what he had done, but he knew no words could erase her pain. I don't have the words," he finally managed, his voice cracking under the weight of his despair. "What I did is unforgivable. I'll never forgive myself. But, Chloe, please. I would do anything to try and make it right. Anything." Chloe studied him, her gaze steady and unrelenting. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lucas understood that nothing he could say would ever bring back her baby or undo the suffering he had caused. He felt utterly powerless. Finally, Chloe exhaled deeply and closed her eyes, as though making a difficult decision. When she looked at him again, her expression had changed. The pain was still there, etched into her features, but something new had emerged, something Lucas couldn't quite identify. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Lucas," she said honestly. "What happened? What you did? It was devastating. But," she hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully, "I can see that you're trying. Maybe Maybe there's a chance that one day I'll be able to move forward. But it won't be easy, and it won't be quick. Lucas nodded slowly, a fragile sense of hope stirring within him. He understood that their path would be long and difficult, but the possibility of a different future was enough to keep him going. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said with quiet determination. "No matter how long it takes, I'll prove to you that I've changed, that I can be someone you trust again, someone you can, maybe, forgive someday." Chloe held his gaze for a moment, her expression still guarded, but there was a faint crack in the walls she had built. It wasn't full forgiveness. It wasn't a solution to everything that had been broken, but it was something, a small opening. "We'll see," she said with a quiet sigh. "We'll see if you can." The silence that followed was heavy, but it carried a sliver of hope. When Chloe stood and walked toward the door, leaving Lucas alone on the couch, he didn't feel the same crushing despair as before. Instead, he felt the faintest flicker of possibility. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but he knew there was at least a chance for redemption. The days after Chloe's revelation were a turning point for Lucas. Her words played over and over in his mind, each one sharpening the guilt and regret that now defined his every thought. He had caused unimaginable pain, not just to Chloe, but to many others who had been caught in the wake of his ruthless business decisions. Yet rather than letting this guilt consume him, Lucas resolved to use it as fuel for change. This wasn't about simply winning Chloe's love back. It was about becoming a man who deserved her respect and could take responsibility for the damage he had done. Lucas made a decision. He would no longer allow his past to define him. Instead, he would take action to repair what he could. He needed to prove, not only to Chloe, but also to himself, that he could be better. His first step was to track down those who had suffered because of his actions. He sought out the families whose lives he had upended and whose businesses he had crushed. Lucas knew that apologies wouldn't be enough, but he hoped that facing them, admitting his wrongdoing, and offering to help in any way he could would be a start. The first visit was to the family of an old competitor, a man whose business Lucas had destroyed years ago. He arrived unannounced, standing at the doorstep of a modest house in a working-class neighborhood that was a world away from his own life of luxury. When the door opened, the man who stood before him was a stranger, yet Lucas recognized the pain in his eyes, a pain that mirrored Chloe's. "I'm Lucas Marshall," he said, his voice trembling with sincerity. "I'm here to apologize." The man looked at Lucas for a long time, disbelief clearly written on his face. "Apologize?" he said, laughing bitterly. "What's that going to change now?" "I can't change the past," Lucas replied, his voice steady. "But I can try to help rebuild the future. I'm here to offer compensation and do what I can to repair what I destroyed." Over the following weeks, Lucas continued his journey toward redemption. He knocked on doors, met with families, and offered more than just money. He gave his time, listened to their stories, and tried to truly grasp the damage his actions had caused. He began donating significant sums to struggling small businesses, creating recovery programs to help other entrepreneurs regain their footing. Chloe watched from a distance. At first, she remained guarded, keeping a close eye on Lucas's behavior. She knew he was making an effort, but her forgiveness was not something he could earn quickly. However, as the days passed and Lucas's actions demonstrated genuine change, Chloe began to feel something unexpected, a new sense of respect for the man she once resented. Lucas was proving that this time his words weren't hollow. One evening, Chloe stood on the balcony, gazing out at the city lights, when Lucas approached quietly. He had just returned from another one of his reconciliation visits. His expression was calm and resolute. "How was it today?" Chloe asked, still looking at the skyline. Lucas let out a long, heavy sigh. "Tough," he admitted, "but necessary. Every conversation, every apology, it's a step toward becoming a better person. Not just for you, Chloe, but for me too." Chloe turned to face him. There was a new softness in her gaze. The hardened anger that she had carried for so long seemed to have eased. For the first time, she saw that Lucas wasn't just saying he had changed, he was proving it. The arrogant man, who had once barged into her life on a whim, was gone. In his place was someone who was fighting to be better. Someone who was fighting for them. "I can see that, Lucas," Chloe said. Her voice was calm, steady. "And I want you to know that I'm ready to try. Maybe it's time we leave the past behind and build something new." Relief washed over Lucas. He hadn't realized just how much he needed to hear those words. It meant more than he could have imagined. Chloe was willing to give them a real chance, not as two people bound by a wager, but as two individuals ready to start fresh. As the 6-month marriage arrangement reached its end, something surprising happened. Chloe and Lucas grew closer. Their conversations became more natural, more sincere. They began sharing laughter and meaningful moments, slowly discovering a love neither of them had anticipated. They were no longer two distant people locked in a contract. They were two individuals rediscovering each other, finding something genuine in a place where it never seemed possible. One night, just before their 6 months ended, Lucas planned a special dinner. He knew this moment would be pivotal. He didn't want their relationship to end there. "Chloe," he said nervously during dinner, "I know our agreement is almost up, but I don't want this to end. I don't want us to end." His voice trembled slightly as he continued. "I've fallen in love with you, Chloe, truly, and I want us to continue, but as a real couple, no bets, no games." Chloe looked at him, surprised by his honesty. Yet as he spoke, her heart softened. She realized she had grown to care for him too. She had quietly fallen in love with him over those weeks. "I love you too, Lucas," Chloe said, her voice steady and warm. "And I want to try. I want to build something real with you this time, as equals, as a real couple." In that moment, both felt a sense of pure happiness. They had overcome what once seemed insurmountable, and together they were ready to begin again. Several months later, Chloe began noticing changes in her body. She felt nauseous each morning, something entirely new to her. A doctor's visit confirmed it. She was pregnant. When she told Lucas, his reaction was a mixture of joy and disbelief. He hugged her tightly, tears of happiness in his eyes. All the heartache, all the challenges, now seemed to have led them to this moment, a fresh start for a growing family. "This time, I want to do everything right," Lucas said, his voice steady and full of resolve. "I want to marry you again, not because of a bet, not for any other reason than love. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Chloe's smile was warm, her tears spilling freely. "I want that too, Lucas," she replied. "This time it will be real. a wedding we both choose for the right reasons. The ceremony was small and intimate. It wasn't about extravagance or impressing anyone. Their vows were honest and simple, surrounded by close friends and family who had supported them through their journey. It was no longer a rushed decision or part of a game. This time, it was about love and commitment, a genuine new beginning. Lucas knew his path wasn't yet complete. He still had much to prove, not only to Chloe, but also to himself and those whose lives he had once damaged. But now he had a purpose: to be the husband Chloe deserved and the father their child would need. As they danced slowly, Chloe rested her head on his chest and softly said, "Who would have thought it all started with a bet?" Lucas smiled, pulling her closer. "Who would have thought it'd be the best bet I ever made?" With hearts full of love and hope, Chloe and Lucas looked forward to the next chapter, ready to embrace a future built on redemption, forgiveness, and new beginnings. What do you think? Did Chloe make the right choice in forgiving and marrying Lucas? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring story. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching.